Back in January of 2021, I invested into a crypto project called Stacks. Stacks is a project aiming to build a secondary network on top of Bitcoin that would allow NFTs, apps, smart contracts, and more to be built within the Bitcoin ecosystem. Basically, imagine the security and decentralization of Bitcoin, but with all the features and utility of something like Ethereum and Terra Luna. For those of you who are maybe a little bit confused about what is the difference between something like Bitcoin and Ethereum, I thought they were essentially the same thing. Bitcoin was created by a mysterious figure called Satoshi Nakamoto after the 2008 financial crisis. Satoshi Nakamoto's goal with Bitcoin was to create this digital currency of sorts that could allow people to exchange value peer-to-peer without a middleman or without a bank in between. Bitcoin was also created with scarcity in mind, with just 21 million Bitcoins ever being able to be created. Ethereum, by contrast, is a completely different thing. It is not the same type of thing as Bitcoin. Ethereum pioneered something called smart contracts, which were a huge innovation in the crypto space. Basically, a way for agreements based on a set of rules to be automatically executed without having to have two parties trust each other or without needing a third party to be a go-between. Ethereum took the concept of blockchain and the concept of decentralization and created a platform that allowed you to build apps on top of it, opening up blockchain technology to all kinds of experiments and use cases. So Bitcoin is more like a currency or digital gold or a store of value, and Ethereum is a network that other apps are built on top of. And Stacks is kind of like a bridge between the two, enabling Bitcoin to not only be a store of value, but also to have a network built on top of it that allows it to do a lot of the things that Ethereum could do. So when I first heard about it, I was obviously really excited about the idea and saw it as a way to potentially help me get to my $1 million goal. Bitcoin is the king of all cryptos. It's the most secure network on the planet, and it's a household name at this point. And I could easily see projects being really interested in building, decentralized apps on top of Bitcoin, on top of its security, on top of its name brand recognition. And the more projects that decide to utilize Stacks and utilize Bitcoin to build these apps out, the bigger that Stacks gets and the higher the price that Stacks goes. So I decided to buy $557 worth of Stacks. Keep in mind, this was really early in my journey. I didn't have a lot of money to invest in at that time. 557 was pretty much my standard for if I was gonna invest in a project, I was throwing down between $500 and $700 into that project. And my goal with Stacks at that time was as a long-term investment. Some of these projects I'll go into, and I'll go into it with a more short-term mindset. It's maybe a little bit more of a risky project. It's maybe a little bit more of a volatile project. And so I'm thinking short-term with that project because I don't really know how long that project's gonna last. With something like Stacks, I saw it as a potential big thing in the future, just as Ethereum's taken multiple years to build out and become this big thing. In my mind, if Stacks were to succeed, it would be the same kind of journey where it'd take multiple years and even, maybe even decades for it to really build out into something amazing. And Stacks has this thing called stacking. It's basically this way you can take your Stacks, you can lock it up and earn Bitcoin as a reward. The interest for stacking is pretty low compared to some of these other crazy small risky projects. Some of these small risky projects are promising 100,000% interest or whatever. Stacks is promising around 8% annual interest, which is pretty low comparative to those things, but obviously better than zero. And the reason I was investing in Stacks wasn't because of some passive income or anything like that. I was investing into the project just like I would invest in Ethereum, thinking, the price of Stacks could go up over time as it becomes a better and bigger project and as it becomes more innovative and used across the space. It's easy to forget that people that invest in Bitcoin, they don't invest in Bitcoin so they could get paid out interest. They're investing in Bitcoin because they think the price of Bitcoin is going to go up. And that's how most crypto projects have worked up until this point. Actually, before DeFi came along, pretty much no projects at all paid out any sort of interest. That's more of a newer thing in the crypto space. I downloaded something called the Hero Wallet and got it set up with my ledger so I could, get my Stacks working and earning this interest. The process was a little confusing to get set up, but after a little bit, I was able to get my tokens locked up in something called Fridger's Pool, which basically allowed me to lock up my Stacks, earn those Bitcoin rewards, but as kind of like a twist on the process, it would then sell those Bitcoin rewards, buy Stacks, and give me Stacks interest instead. I like this a lot better because I felt like the potential return on Stacks could be a lot higher, where Bitcoin might 5x or 7x. I was hoping that Stacks had the potential to 50x or 100x. Then I just kind of let everything run, and with a long-term investment, I don't check up on it every week. I don't even really check up on it every month. It's more like after a couple months, I'll be like, oh yeah, I have this investment and I'll go check to see what it's been up to. 4 months later, I had done really well on some investments. I had some extra investment cash and I decided to double down on Stacks, investing an additional $5,138. And I did the same kind of process where I took my money, I put it on Hero Wallet, I locked it up in Fridger's Pool so I could earn interest, and then kind of just left it alone to see what would happen. And since then, it's been about 10 months, and obviously a lot's changed in the crypto space. We went from May, where the market kind of died, summer kind of just sucked, and then everything just blew up again. The market came back to life. We were making all kinds of crazy money, and then December, the market kind of died, and now everything kind of sucks. And over that time, my original investment of $557 ended up turning into $1,615. But my additional investment of $5,138 has really done pretty much nothing. It's pretty much stayed exactly the same. I think at one point it did go up quite a bit, but then since then it's come back down to sit at, exactly the same price as pretty much what I invested at. I think I've lost about $100. My total Stacks initial investment was $5,695, and today it's worth $6,659. And my interest for locking up my Stacks over the last 10 months has added up to $531 in today's prices, putting my grand total to $7,190. Now, obviously, this isn't a crazy amount of money, and it's kind of a boring result as far as crypto goes. I've had projects where I've invested a little amount and gotten a crazy amount. I've had projects where I've invested a lot of money and lost it all. And this is one of those in-between projects where I invested a little bit of money, I made a little bit of profit. But as far as I'm concerned, any investment where I didn't lose money is all right in my book. Also, as I mentioned earlier, Stacks is a long-term investment. And I think that's something that a lot of newer investors are kind of missing about the crypto space, is they see it as a short-term kind of like get-rich-quick opportunity, and they're playing a lot of things just purely short-term. And they don't realize that, yes, you can make a crazy amount of money on these short-term plays, but also, you can make a crazy amount of money on these long-term plays. And it's very likely that with a lot of these projects, the way you're going to make the most money is investing into some of these long-term projects and holding for a long period of time. And that's how people made a ton of money in Bitcoin. They weren't buying it in October of 2010 and then selling it in, January of 2011 and being like, great, I doubled my money. This is amazing. The people that made a ton of money in Bitcoin were the people that bought it in 2010 and then just kind of buried it in a drawer, forgot about it for a decade. And then they're like, oh my gosh, I'm a multi-millionaire now and I have millions of dollars and this is crazy. And I'm not saying you should just bury your investments in a drawer, but I am saying there's a lot of money to be made in crypto in the long-term investments. Some of these projects will last the test of time. I believe that probably 95% of the projects currently in the crypto space will not exist over the next 5 years, or they'll exist at such a small capacity that they'll pretty much be pointless because there's a lot of fluff in the market. There's a lot of things that really don't make sense. They don't add up. And those are your short-term plays. But I'm also hopeful some of these projects do last over the next couple decades. They do grow into these massive behemoths of a project, and they continue growing and innovating over time. Currently, Stacks market cap is $1.6 billion. Compare that to something like Polkadot at $17 billion, Terra at $33 billion, BNB at $60 billion, and Ethereum sitting at $300 billion. If Stacks ever reached the market cap that Ethereum's currently at, that'd be a 187x gain, turning my $7,000 into $1.3 million. Now, obviously, that's a best case scenario, completely hypothetical, and one of those numbers you add up on the calculator just for fun to, see what potentially could happen. Nothing's ever certain in crypto, and definitely another project could come up with the same idea, do it way better, and far surpass what Stacks is doing and just make it irrelevant. That's always a possibility. Or the entire industry could shift so much that, this vision doesn't even make sense 5 years down the line. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm willing to risk $7,000 and just kind of wait the next couple years just to see what happens. And as far as what the future holds for Stacks and my current thoughts, Stacks has only been building since 2019. It's fairly new as crypto projects go, and it has a long way to go if it wants to realize its vision. I think Stacks needs more projects building on top of it, and it needs to attract more talent to it. One thing I've noticed about Stacks is the network's pretty slow compared to things like Luna and compared to things like Avalanche. And I feel like it really needs some upgrades if it wants to compete, which I have read those are in progress. I still think it's a rad idea, and the fact that it's built on Bitcoin would really set it apart from a lot of these other blockchain networks. In fact, I think it's such a good idea that I think somebody is going to do this. I think somebody's going to build a network on top of Bitcoin and be successful at it. Like I said earlier, I don't know if that's going to be Stacks. Early in 2017, there was tons of different companies competing on interoperability, which is the idea of blockchains talking to each other. And there was a ton of projects that sprung up. They're like, we're going to be the ones that solve interoperability. And I can't even think of a project that was around back then that exists today and was successful. But projects did end up springing up after that, like Polkadot and Cosmos, that have been far more successful at achieving that vision. So I don't know if Stacks will do it or somebody else will do it. Really, we'll just kind of have to wait and see what happens as, time goes on. But I think somebody is going to do it. And real quick, just currently with the market state being so slowed down from where it was, back in the fall, I'm paying a lot more attention to these longer term projects, like projects that I feel like I can invest in and make money over the next 5 years, just because it seems like a safer place to stick my money than maybe some of the smaller, more risky projects, not really knowing what the market's going to do next. In my mind, if the market ends up blowing up, next month and I have my money in long-term projects, I'm still going to benefit. If the market ends up crashing next month, well, I have my money in longer-term projects and I'm still going to benefit over the next couple of years. And if the market just continues going sideways, well, I have my money in long-term projects and I'm still going to benefit over the next couple of years. It feels like a way that I can win no matter what happens. At least that's my thought, as long as I'm picking somewhat decent projects that are going to last. I guess we'll see over the next couple of years if that ends up being a solid strategy or a really stupid one. And as always, none of this is investment advice. None of this is me telling you should buy Stacks or shouldn't buy Stacks. I'm just sharing my journey and my story of like, hey, I did this experiment. I put my money in. Here's how much I made. Here's what's the process. Here's what happened. You always got to do your own research and make your own calls on your own. This, again, is just my journey, what I'm going through, me just explaining it. You could be watching this video 5 months from now and it might not make sense to invest in Stacks. Maybe some crazy things happened. Like, you always have to do your research because, even if it was a good decision right now, it might not be 3 months down the line when you're watching this video. If this video is helpful, make sure to hit that like button. It helps my channel grow. If you haven't joined our Discord group, House of Obsidian, there's a link in the description. We have weekly AMAs and classes and all kinds of fun stuff, so you're definitely gonna wanna check that out if that's something that's interesting to you. And if you wanna see more videos like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the little bell next to it if you wanna actually be notified each time I release a video. If you never hit the little bell, you won't ever actually be notified when I release a video. Instead, you'll have to go to my channel and look up my videos every time you want to watch them. But hitting the little bell allows you to get a notification each time I upload a video. So if that's something you want to do, then make sure you hit the little bell. Thanks for watching and I'll see you next week.